And they have one right here. That whole bunch. The parties with the singing and the flute and the chanting, those are Espeths or Sabbaths or whatever
don't get
they're called.
excited, huh?
Read what they do, Guy. They use blood in their rituals, and the blood that has the most power is baby's blood.
It's longer than I remembered.
It's been a while.
I know.
Welcome to episode 1, season 4 of Covendom Live. This is our weekly show where we discuss initiatory witchcraft and the religion of witchcraft from an Alexandrian point of view. I am your host, Brian Cain, and these are my lovely co-hosts, Levi, Rowland, and Elie Barnes. Tonight, our topic will be watering down witchcraft, and we're going to be discussing what we think is pivotal and positive and negative right now in the craft movement as far as public relations, the actual work, the books being written, Instagram, all that good stuff. So who knows where it could go?
Who knows?
We are a Restream clientele, so we actually are going to YouTube and Facebook. So a lot of our viewers who are all over the world are watching us live on Facebook, so we don't get those YouTube clicks. So please go and subscribe to our channel, Hex Education, and like the video. It helps people find them later, which a lot of people do watch them later and not live.
Yes.
If you would like to call in with a question or two for me and my lovely consorts, please call 1-309-463-3377. Or I guess it's 309 Goddess, right?
It is.
And go ahead and have a couple of questions prepared, and we will queue you up. You can listen to the show live while you are in the queue. So before we get on to the topic, Levi is going to play a little icebreaker game with us.
I am.
I don't know what we're in for exactly.
I am going to play an icebreaker game. So we're going to be talking about a lot of people. We're going to be talking about a lot of movements and a lot of things today. So I've got a little thing we're going to do. First of all, I do want to say hello. I see all of you in the comments, Facebook, YouTube, you're coming through. We see you. I'm so glad you're here.
Where are the comments?
With us. Right
they're
here.
big.
They're big, yeah. Big comments, huge. So, many people have heard of Bang, Marry, Kill, or some version of it a little bit more vulgar. We're going to do curse, banish, bless, or heal.
Okay.
Curse,
banish, bless, or
so
heal.
The first thing that comes to your mind with
Yeah, the first thing that comes to your mind with the name that I give you.
Okay.
Okay? And there are going to be some names here, people. Curse, banish, bless, heal. Ready?
I'm scared.
You should be scared. It's gonna be, and no thinking. I want it to be quick. It's like a psychological game. Maxine Sanders.
Bless.
Bless.
We got it right.
Bless, of course.
Yes.
Okay. Aleister Crowley. Quick.
Heal.
Heal.
Aw, look at these people being nice to
Yes.
Crowley.
He needed a healing. He still does.
I just think
He
about
still
it.
does, Elie says. I just spoke with him on the Astral
That's right.
before the show. He was
He
talking to me
comes
about
out.
his sciatica. Okay. Dion Fortune.
Bless.
Bless. What are they again? Curse?
Bless, curse, banish, heal.
Banish. No, she couldn't be in the banish category. Heal,
Scott
bless.
Cunningham.
Banish.
Banish.
The quickness with which it came.
Double banish.
The quickness with which it came.
I don't dislike him personally.
No, we don't
just
know him.
The quickness with which it came. I knew it would. Anton LaVey.
I don't know. I think bless.
Bless?
I grew up with some LeVay. That was one of the
I'll have
first
to
little
say heal.
rebellion things that you could do.
Okay, curse, Spanish, bless, or heal. We're blessing Anton LaVey here tonight.
I
people.
healed.
You did
job.
heal. You
Good
healed
job.
him. You
Good
healed him.
job.
Z Budapest. The face.
Heal.
Well, I'm going to say banish.
She said it so politely, though. I'm so sorry, but you have to go now.
Well, I don't know these people personally. This is just an attitude about their work and their philosophy today,
Fine.
right? What do I think about it today?
What do you think about it today?
Banish.
Wow, okay. Thorne Mooney.
Bless.
Love. Bless.
Okay.
Love's not one of them. I know bless.
Gerald Gardner.
Bless.
Bless.
Christian Day.
Heal.
Heal.
Bless 1,000 times.
Bless, of course.
Of course, bless. Blavatsky.
I want to cross between
I have to go
curse
and
and banish.
banish right now.
Yeah.
Banish.
It's the racism for me. I think I would
banish.
too. Sally Ann Glassman.
Oh,
Bless.
bless.
Bless, right? New Orleans. Yeah. Stuart Farrar.
Bless.
Or Heal.
And
I could
Heal.
go with Heal too. I could go with Heal. He did have an illness at the end there. Who else did I put? God, I had a huge
He's
list.
dead now.
He is dead. He's dead.
Illness now. You can't.
Ellie's trying to heal Aleister Crowley beyond the grave.
Yeah, but that was a spiritual
He
healing.
It's a
hangs out.
spiritual
He hangs out.
thing,
He's got
they say to me.
ulcers. He's got
ulcers
Yeah.
while he hangs out with Elie.
Yeah.
Just complains about his ulcers. Okay. Who did I not say?
So interesting.
Robert Cochran.
Oh, I have to say, oh God.
See, I love him. That wasn't really his name too, Roy Bowers, and I don't know him either.
Oh, I
but
have to say,
let's do Heal.
To
let's do Heal.
banish.
Ooh.
Sorry,
Tension.
I think I have to banish.
Let's do some. We need some different words. Next week, can we have different group of words?
Yeah, we won't play this game. anymore.
Ellie's like, I would like a more complicated set of diagnostic tools
Maybe something
for
like-
these dead people.
Something like kiss or lick.
Ellie would like to lick a few of these people. That's okay.
He was attractive.
I know.
Who?
Roy
Robert
Bowers.
Cochran.
Yes.
Oh,
He was
okay.
younger.
Okay, did not know that. Did not know that person.
Oh, Sybil
personally.
League. I've thought about Sybil League. I mean, I think she's like one of the milestones
Sybil
for
League.
me. But bless.
Bless.
Bless, I guess. Maybe Heal. Levi Rowland.
Bless.
Oh,
Aw,
look
we
how
love
special
Levi.
I am.
Look at him throwing his own name in there.
I did.
How would you done
Oh,
when
and
both were like banish?
I also, Carrie Ewers, she made me.
Oh,
bless.
bless.
She was, bless, absolutely. Blessed be
That's what
Carrie.
you guys were.
I told you I'd put you on the list.
And kiss.
Okay, well, it's fine. Do you want to keep going? Is that a good enough list for you?
It's fine with
It's
me.
interesting how most of them we actually had good feelings about.
We did.
Yeah, for the most part, the reasons can, be complicated too. So tonight's topic, how it came into being was, we were obviously brainstorming about what shows we're going to do. We've done, I think, 40 episodes already. So obviously we've gone through a lot of topics. And of course, some of the same subjects are going to come up because the show is all about, witchcraft. So, there are only so many topics that you can explore. And we didn't want to have a how to light a candle show. There's plenty of those out there. We didn't want to do that. So we wanted to talk about craft in an intellectual way and explore its philosophies and its actual practices and educate people. So I thought often long and hard, and part of the reason why I did this show to begin with was because there are not that many initiatory witches working in the public view right now. We've often said we started the whole thing. Gerald Gardner was the first publicity witch. He was the first witch on TV. He was the first witch on newspapers. He was the first witch who wrote books. He was the first witch to do all the media stuff. And a lot of the Gardnerians followed suit in that. And then, of course, Alex Sanders and Maxine did that work and carried it forward as well. But today, there are very few initiates who, we've got a couple authors, two of them right here at this table, and some of those authors aren't writing about initiatory craft yet. And then there's a few other authors out there who are initiates who are writing books, but there's not that many. Most of the books being published currently are by people who were never initiated or trained and are not actually connected to the work that we do. There are, of course, and I'm going to be a little echoey tonight, guys. Sorry, we are working out the mic situation, and I'm the loudest speaker, I think. So
Maybe.
just pretend I'm Darth Vader. It's fine. We've got some other people who are doing shows like this now, or people who did previously do YouTube channels. So there are some. It is out there, but not as prevalent. So that's why we wanted to do it. So the topic about this was like, why have so many initiates surrendered the narrative of witchcraft, and how damaging has that been? Because the general public takes its education from whoever's holding the microphone, literally.
Yes.
Whoever put pen to paper, whoever took the pictures, they don't really look at people's credentials. I think serious seekers do, because they begin to do the research and they read enough books and they begin to discover that there's a deeper side to witchcraft than what appears to be on the surface. So they will eventually find it, and that's part of what this show is about, or why I wrote my book, Initiation to Witchcraft, was to help people find that. Because if it wasn't for the elders who had been doing that work, I wouldn't have found it. And certainly their work, in my opinion, is still very relevant, perhaps more relevant than current work being done now, which I know some authors don't like that because they want their work to be, they want us to support the current work. And I think we should if it's good. but it's sort of, to give you a little bit of a message. When I was thinking about this show last night, I am not the superstitious sort. I am not the kind of person who sees spooks everywhere or claims fairies talk to me. That's just not really how I operate most of the time, and these guys could tell you that. But I was sitting there thinking about it, and all of a sudden there was an extreme sudden movement on the bookshelf next to me. Like books just settled very loudly. And I thought, something, I felt drawn to see what book was there. And I went there, and there was a couple books, and then there was this very thin book, and it wasn't where it should have been. And I pulled it out, and it was a big old picture of Alexander's on the cover. And I thought, well, this is really weird, and I opened it up, and the first thing it said, that art of opening books, message. It said, see if any of you can do better than what's written in the Book of Shadows. See if you can do better. And I thought that to myself, that is a message, and it was really relevant to this show. So when we're talking about the work of the elders, see who among you could actually do better, than what has been done in craft already. And, I certainly could not. When I wrote my book, it was about adding to what had been done, which was the difficult challenge, because I didn't want to just repeat or regurgitate information. I didn't want to invent things. I wanted to support the work that was already there. I became an initiate of witchcraft and a witchcraft priest because of that work and because the foundation of it was already there. And, I just want to complement it and serve it, and I enjoy it. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel, and it's certainly okay if you want to do that in whatever your walk is, but it's not the reason why I got initiated. So, I don't know. I thought that was an interesting message. So maybe it was coincidence. I don't know. But Alex says, try to see if you can do better. And I think he means you can't. And I don't think you can either.
The general.
So, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Because he was actually talking to whoever was helping him with this book, and he was talking about the Book of Shadows, and basically, and the person said, "Why are you quoting the Book of Shadows? It's we should all be over that now. It's all old." And his response to the person was to see if you can write something better, which sort of ended the conversation, right? Because no one could really.
No,
it hasn't been done in all this time. There's no reinventing the wheel on witchcraft that has been a better version. It just doesn't exist, from my opinion. But so before we go on to any calls or questions on the screen, let's hear from Levi and Elie. And then when it comes to the questions, I'll answer last because I want to not talk over you guys the whole time. I want to be polite.
Look how polite he is.
Okay.
So sweet, so gentle.
I want to, just like I try to add to the work, I want to add to your work tonight. So, but, if I do jump in on a question, it's because it's a question I'm very sensitive to.
Yeah.
That I'm afraid of how it could be answered. So
No, I get that.
Otherwise, I won't. Yeah.
For me, the biggest issue when Brian told me what the subject was, I was a little apprehensive, I think, because...
Isn't that half my topics, really?
No. Some of them are fabulous. But I knew that this was going to be one where people were not sure what we meant by this, because...
Oh, it was a bit clickbait.
Yeah, exactly. So people are like, what do you mean by the watering down of witchcraft? And I think no matter what, we're going to come at this from a different perspective than a lot of people. And I agree with Brian that that's the whole point of having this show. There are tons of shows and TikToks and media outlets that are going to speak to you about witchcraft in a way that is what we would call watered down, that is about witchcraft solely as a praxis, completely divorced from its initiatory beginnings in England, divorced from the religio-magical history of it. It's just, that's the norm. And so I actually don't mind sometimes that we might be repetitive or that we sound strident or that we have very, similar beliefs or whatever. That's kind of the whole point, honestly. And I'm glad that we have this outlet to be able to talk to people about a form of craft that is unrelated to those other media outlets that speak of craft solely as a practice, solely as something that everyone does, solely as something that has to do with lighting candles or liking the earth, which we should all be ecological. That's not really what's at issue here. Another initiate once said to me, I won't say who it is, but we always call it an earth-based religion. That's what everybody says when they get into witchcraft. I'm drawn to its earth-based religion. And she said, you're going to have to squint really hard to see it as that in the modern world, right? So I'm here, and Brian's here, and Elliot, is here to talk about witchcraft in a different way. And sometimes that will come off as exclusionary. Sometimes that will come off as strident. Maybe it comes off as elitist at times. I can't care about that. I just can't. What I care about is, my lived religion. And I'm not going to change it or accommodate it to make it palatable to people.
How quaint. Even the rabble.
So, Miss Elie, what would you like to say about watering down witchcraft?
I thought about this all week long because we knew the subject at least a week ago. And I have a degree in philosophy and a minor in comparative religion, and so I put that thinking cap on this subject. I will probably be saying things during this episode that are also controversial because I look at the history of religions and their foundations, their texts, and the way that they're taught in the beginning, their dogma, and then how over time the population changes and asks that the religion could be changed to accommodate the new population or new theories. People start commenting and changing the original religion. That's what's happened here too. And I'm thinking about Catholicism towards Protestantism. But I know in Hinduism, in Buddhism, in other religions, Islam is a strong example of how that's getting modified extensively today.
It's being politicized in different ways.
By different sections, different factions of it. So I am a conservative thinker. And the reason that I love Alexandrian witchcraft is because it's very specific in its teaching, its philosophy, its hermetic knowledge, its ritual practice, its devotion to the gods in a very specific way. And I think we should defend it. And I do believe we're doing that tonight and with the show. And I'll be thinking about comparing what's happening to witchcraft with what's happened in the religions of the world, and also read my Book of Shadows again in the last week because I felt that was the most important thing to review about this subject.
To ground yourself,
the original Book of Shadows.
And no one has written anything better. Definitely I think that there's two ways of looking at this, and I actually have both points of view. In one sense, there's this sort of idea that the craft has changed or it's evolved. I don't think that's really true. I think that there are just as many initiates now as there were back in the 1950s, probably more. Mm-hmm. I don't think we've grown to the proportions that are being represented as witchcraft. I think that there's just more people identifying with that label now, and there's more usage of it. I think there's more people calling witchcraft magic now than there ever has been. And it's no longer archaeologists or anthropologists doing it. It's actually people practicing. That it's more of a trend now than it ever has been historically, I think. And so, really to us, they're just not the same thing as us. They're not the same thing. You could be practicing a practicing Christian and working magic. Like, we're not in the same universe. And we're not going to fight somebody about a label. Like, I don't really care. I love the word witch. I was initiated as a witch. I'm a witchcraft priest. Witchcraft is my religion. However, I'm not going to struggle with how other people use that word. I just educate people about it from our perspective. And there are historical nuances that are not exactly identical to ours, that we usually can find ours within it. But that particular trend is new, which is, you get a lot of that coming on Instagram or different places like that, where it's like, look at these herbs I sprinkled in this candle on my magical altar. We're not saying these things are bad, but that there's no depth to it, from our perspective. So in one sense, I don't think the craft needs anyone's help. I think the craft is a power unto itself. I think it's doing just fine. But I do think that there's so much noise about the craft now that the true message is drowned out sometimes. And people who are genuinely seeking something with true depth, or genuinely seeking the goddess, or initiatory craft, they get lost in a forest of worthless information. And so sometimes they wander off and they never come back, which is okay. We're not a salvation religion, but I do think it's important once in a while for initiates to light the beacons, and to say, we are here. You can find us. We do exist. But I think the craft is doing just fine. I think what we have is that there's just more noise, and you know what they say, empty barrels make the most noise.
These are truths.
So do we have any questions? If you'd like to call in with questions, otherwise I have some prepared.
Yeah.
309 Goddess, call in with a couple of questions. It can be on tonight's subject, or it can be about anything witchcraft related or Alexandrian related. And we will be happy to speak with you.
And we also can see your comments and questions as well. Thank you to all of the kind things. Elie's getting lots of shout outs.
The
so
only
we can
question
see them.
I have with this big thing with spams, how are you keeping track of?
I'm just making sure if I see a question, I
All
know
right.
to go back to it. They're all here. So we can see them all. So if you ask a question in the comments, we can even put it on screen and answer it so that everyone can see exactly what we're talking about. It's very cool.
This show just gets fancier and fancier.
So fancy.
I'm just glad it's not at my house and I have my lovely curtain back.
Yes.
You know,
And that we're not
I'm so
holding-
happy that Elie is here with her gorgeous lipstick on and she's joining us.
And we're misholding
So,
the dogs, though. We don't get to hold the dog.
They drive
Brian
me
brought
crazy.
questions. He's prepared.
I did. So I'll comment last because they're my questions. So
Okay.
I may not comment at all if you guys ask. But so the first thing I want to ask is name 3 things that you think have damaged the craft.
3 things that have damaged the craft. I will put a caveat on this. I agree with Brian. I think the craft is a power in and of itself that is divine. I do think it's prophetic in the world, especially in the Western world, as a voice for the goddess, as for the female divine. So I don't think it's actually damageable. But I agree with the idea. So do I think that there's something that can damage it publicly? Yes. So 3 things that have damaged the craft. The first one for me, the biggest one, was the creation of the concept, and this is a common phrase that we do not believe, but that you will hear endlessly online. The first thing to damage the craft is the phrase, witchcraft is a practice, Wicca is a religion, right? So the proliferation of the term Wicca as a religious identity that does not require initiation, and then witchcraft solely as an orthopraxy, as a practice, as something you do. It's not religious. We have argued endlessly on this show that that's ahistorical. That's the first thing. The second thing I think that has damaged craft has been patriarchy. That's something that I think is deeply damaging to witchcraft. I think the rise of the tradcraft movement that tried to wrench the goddess out of witchcraft as a response to the goddess movement of the 70s swung the pendulum way too far. I think they have completely removed the heart of goddess worship, of the ecstasy of the goddess from craft, so patriarchy. The third thing I would say that has damaged the craft has been witchcraft as an aesthetic. That the concept of witchy, it's an adjective you hear all the time, that to be a witch is to be an aesthetic. We love beauty. Beauty is part of the Alexandrian path, but I think the idea of witchcraft as an aesthetic. So those are my 3.
Very good. Elie?
I love those, Levi. I think that I'll first say poor quality academic research has damaged the craft. When we first got some books, at the old Barnes and Noble or whatever bookstore we went to in the 80s and 70s, there was a lot of jumping on the bandwagon of historical research, anthropological research, looking at the stone circles in England, looking at the carvings in the church, looking at folklore, and then creating this whole world around some of those things that tried to prove, see, we know witchcraft is old, we know paganism is old, we've been doing it all along, and really didn't think out the research too well. They kind of came at it with the premise that they wanted to prove. And it's getting better today. Like, I think we're getting a little bit more well-rounded in research. But in the beginning, I think, of the witchcraft movement, there was a lot of really low-quality history and research put out there. My second thing is general paganism, I think, has damaged witchcraft. It's included every aspect of anything that is pre-Christian, right, all the way around the world. And really, I think that's a big watering down. Again, with folklore. Folklore, we used to just think, okay, it's a superstition or a folklore that proves that witchcraft is real or witches were real historically. And I just think paganism has added so many ideas and vocabulary words that don't have anything to do with religious witchcraft. The third thing, well, I was going to say the aesthetic too, because that's really the big deal, right? How everybody looks, and that you're witchy in style. Maybe the fact that it was rebellious for a lot of years, to be interested in the occult and witchcraft in general, and it kind of flavored it where the bad boy and the bad girl were interested in it. I think that's kind of sad.
Okay.
Well, I think you guys were very well spoken. I definitely have to agree with misogyny. It's one of the things that I think is, it's quite funny because we were talking about Robert Cochran earlier, and he's sort of the inspiration in some ways for what people call tradcraft today. He did worship a goddess.
Yes, he did.
He worshipped a moon goddess and a horned god, and so did Charles Cardell, and they also practiced initiations and had covens. They were they were practicing the religion of witchcraft. So the tradcraft of today has nothing to do with that. And, it has swung into, either you don't believe in anything or you believe in the devil. The goddess is just really not mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a misogynistic move, in my opinion. I think, you all know how I feel about excluding the goddess, right?
I know.
Not a good idea. So plenty of other religions are doing it. We don't need to join them.
No.
It's the most special thing about the religion of witchcraft is that we are the only religion and priesthood in the West solely dedicated to a goddess. Where we do find it in other places in the world, Hinduism, sort of with Kuan Yin, things like that.
In Buddhism.
Here we've got the Virgin Mary and some saints, which don't technically qualify as gods, but we are the priesthood of the goddess. So that's very unique and special. You take that out of it, and what do you have left, really?
I know.
So
we do have a caller.
Oh, good. Misogyny, and then the other one I was going to say is misinformation, which I think that the misinformation, comes in the form of just so many people spewing out things that they've made up or re-spewing things that other people have made up. And the genuine seeker doesn't know the difference between, maybe that person's famous because they looked really good on camera and they got on a TV show, and so everyone thinks they need to listen to them, or maybe that person's famous because they have 60,000 YouTube followers and they did great makeup tutorials, so people think that they're worth listening to, or the person wrote a book. None of these things actually qualify anyone on the subject. I could write a book about brain surgery tomorrow. Doesn't mean I know anything about it. So
Yeah.
We have a caller.
We do. It should be Ashton. Hi, Ashton. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi. It's nice to speak to you. How are you?
Doing well. How are you beautiful, gorgeous witches doing?
Doing fabulous. What is
Brilliant.
your question?
So, yes, I had two questions, if possible.
Mm-hmm.
So my first question pertains to the lack of, let's say, true working covens and the current abundance of primarily fellowship or ad hoc covens
Yeah.
that, exist in modern times. In my experience, I found that, non-initiatory contemporary witchcraft practices place very little stress upon the other or having a witness to working. So my first question is, within initiatory craft or Alexandrian craft, how important is it to have either the other or someone to witness work performed to, let's say, assure or confirm that ego, delusion, or something else of the like is not at play?
All witches can work certain things alone, but there are entire rites within our religion that are not workable without another human soul.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that.
So you're going to be observed by
Yeah.
at least one person, right? One other person most of the time.
Yeah, there is a heart of our religion that is not practicable without
Alone. Right.
practicable. What a word!
Right.
It's not doable, frankly, without another person.
Is that what you mean by other? At least one. So that you're defining it that it cannot be solitary witchcraft. Because that's what we would
Yeah,
say.
primarily, yeah. It's either, not wanting to have, let's say, we want a gender exclusive coven, or we only want to worship, let's say, a god as opposed to the Great Mother and everything like that. It feels like, there's a lack of appreciation in, let's say, solitary witchcraft primarily, the ad hoc covens that perspire from there. There's a lack of appreciation for the other and just appreciating, recognizing that you exist within the other, or, you know, that you have to step outside of yourself and not everything is about yourself.
Correct.
And I feel like that waters down witchcraft, quote unquote, you know, in contemporary times.
Well, Alexandrian and Gardnerian witchcraft are distinct for a few reasons from a lot of other brands of witchcraft, not all. We're a priesthood. It's a priesthood, you know, and there's no such thing as a solitary priest or priestess. The priesthood indicates that you're serving in a caste of people worshipping in a particular religion. So we are spending our time, you know, training, studying, worshipping, and working together. It's not a social club, which is, you know, I almost pulled that out as one of my most damaging things is that, you know, you can find the social club initiates all over Facebook. They love to stroke each other's egos in between attacking other people. That's what they do. And they've turned the craft into a social club. And they're involved in it because they like to feel included in something that's special. That's not the craft. The craft is a secret society of priesthood who work in secret mysteries in their covens, and everything they're doing is not for public preview. You know, we can talk about it, we can light the beacons and say we're here. So these other groups that you have, they're just not doing the same thing. They might be sincere, they might be practicing the religion of witchcraft based on the books that they could find or based on instinct, and there's nothing wrong with that. There are plenty of places in the world where that may be seemingly a person's only option, but it isn't the same caliber as what you get in a good, well-trained training coven. You know, and I think that is few and far between too, because there are covens of initiates that, you know, they're having their Tupperware parties, you know, and they're drinking and they're stroking each other's egos. So I'm not here to say that initiates are always better. Sometimes they're even low grades of people who find their way in. But in a good coven, you know, like we practice the no socializing rule. We're not here to be friends. It takes years and years and years for friendships to develop within our line. You know, it's not about friendship. It's about training and doing the work. So,
You said you had a second one, Ashton?
Yes, indeed. So my second question is about the necessity or importance of raising power in a ritual or working space. I mean, I think we've all experienced anemic or sterile rituals or workings of the like. So I wanted to ask, do you feel that the current trends within the revival of the religion of witchcraft fail to actualize their true potential by perhaps setting aside the importance of raising power at the start of ritual workings or throughout ritual workings? Or how do you, as, let's say, initiated witches, view the importance of raising power compared to, let's say, the current practice you see in contemporary witchcraft? And that might be, you know, exactly solitary witches or ad hoc covens, you know, just jumping in without truly raising power. And,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Elie, you take this first.
I love that question. I think that a lot of people today practicing witchcraft as a religious witchcraft are having a gathering and doing social work, singing, dancing, telling a story, and maybe acting out a ritual. But I think you're really right about raising power is really the point of our rituals too. We are invoking the god and the goddess to come down into the temple, into the circle with us and work with us. And together we're raising power for reasons, you know, to help our group, to help the world around us, whatever workings we're doing to help and heal. It's the most important thing in the magical work. And as Brian said many times, witchcraft, our religion, is also working magic. It's part of what we're doing. It's part of how we define ourselves. So it's got to be done. And I've been in many groups, at least as an observer or a guest, where the stuff is as flat as a pancake.
Yes.
And you're just like, what are they doing? They're just chatting and smiling and eating cookies and dancing in a circle. But you're like, where's the power?
Working through some steps you read online.
Where's the power?
I think I've had multiple conversations with people at festivals or in teaching or in classes I've done. And I can tell you there is a stark difference between somebody who's on an initiatory path, and I mean that regardless of Alexandrian and Gardnerian. I'm talking any path of magic that is deeply transformative versus the masses who are working magic. And the difference is this. The one who's on the path is always asking, where's the power? Where am I getting something? And what am I bringing out of myself? A lot of people nowadays just view magic as mechanistic. If I have the right rocks and the right candles and the right words, something will happen. And there's no actual internalized power in it. There's no
And
will.
the power all comes from the self, as
And
if
they don't have that.
power
They don't.
solely exists in the self.
Yep. It's all coming from will. And you just see people talk about magic as if it's pure mechanism, and that's all it is.
And they don't know. They don't
I
have any
certainly
experience.
I don't
of the
agree
real
that all
magic.
power comes from the self by any way, and by any means do I agree with that. However, I will say this: any real Alexandrian would walk out of a circle with no power because it's empty ritual. There's no point. You know, if there's no power, there's no point. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, that's the whole thing.
We would know it right away.
If there's no power, the gods aren't there.
Yeah, so what's the point
And
of
there's no
continuing?
point to doing it. It's become a role play.
We're not here to LARP.
Well, anyway, Ashton, thank you so much
you
for
so
calling
much.
in and joining us with your questions.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. Thank you all for answering. I hope you have a lovely night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, I love our technology.
It's gotten all fancy again.
I know.
So Levi's got new toys that I sort of don't know how to work. So anyway, so those are very good questions,
I know, I
right?
like them
I
a
thought
lot.
those were good questions.
So I
Yeah.
have another one for you guys, since somebody was coming up this. Social media, good or bad for the craft, and why?
Inevitable. So I think the first thing is the cat's out of the bag. So there's no way we can say we can't go back in time. You can't undo it. You can't be a Luddite. That's not going to work. It's never worked. So we have to
Can't
deal
go
with
back
it.
and take out Skynet.
Yeah, you can't, right? You can't go
Wow.
back and undo it, right?
Wow, that's
So I'll say that's my number one thing. I have went back and forth. I went through a big hiatus recently. A lot of people actually talked to me about this and was like, Brian thought that I'd blocked people and whatnot because I went through a fast where I just didn't use social media.
I thought he was hiding his page. Or
Yeah, he
something.
thought I was hiding stuff. I was like, no, I just haven't been on it. But then I'll go through phases where I really do use it as a communicative tool. Good or bad, I'm going to have to actually say that it's pretty even down the middle both. I think it's good in the sense that it allows us to communicate with initiates from around the world much easier. I think that things like Skype make training, conversations possible, setting up sabbats possible, grand sabbats, things like that. So on some level, good. It has equally been terrible because it has helped contribute to because misinformation spreads like a virus on social media. So I think that the mass spread of misinformation is the price we pay.
There are people who are still beating the message of a Llewellyn book from 1992.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, go ahead.
I feel exactly what Levi says, but also for the reason that if you're well educated and well trained, you can use social media as a strong tool. But if you're not educated and well trained in any particular religion that you choose or philosophy, you don't know what you're looking at. So you've got a lot of different things to wade through. And as Brian said, the pretty people with all the great lighting and the technology get their blog or podcast up in the front of the line. And then people watch that, and they really don't have a way to make any kind of criticisms or value judgments about the quality of what someone's talking about. I don't, this is probably true for Brian. I shouldn't say that because of our age. I started studying.
What do you mean our age?
Sorry. I know, but you're older than Levi. Like, in fact, Ed asked me today. Ed said, "How old do you think Levi is?" And I said, 28.
33.
And that's what Ed said. He said 33. Okay, Ed, you got it right, 33. I thought you were just about to be 30.
If you say my age, I'm pushing you over.
No.
I was about to say, Elie, you're not going to make it. I was trying to give her a signal. I'm like, no.
Okay, so sorry, Brian's 39. But anyway, I started studying witchcraft and the occult before the internet. And
39.
the only thing I
Not
had
that
were a few
old.
goofy people that I could ask questions to, and then, older history books.
Yeah.
There really wasn't much to do except find some people that knew something about it. But I don't know about social media. It makes things goofy. It makes everything goofy.
It does.
Doesn't
It's
it?
goofy.
You guys answered it right. It's got its good and its bad. I mean, I've had an intimate, long journey with social media, and you'll find that I don't tend to interact with a lot of dialogue on it anymore. I used to do a lot of posting in my groups and have conversations with people, and it was just like inviting toxic behaviors. And so I prefer, I love YouTube. I think YouTube's great because you're able to put out a message and you don't actually have to have a conversation with people. You can choose to.
I love that you love that.
I do, because unfortunately when you enter into a dialogue with everybody, it forces you to, you're sharing the microphone, and people, it's so much easier to troll on Facebook. It's sort of really hard to troll on something like this. I mean, you could call in and troll, or you could leave a comment that's going to get deleted. Yeah. Whereas on social media, you're kind of forced to, in Facebook, you're forced to keep the conversation going for the people reading. So you can't just delete everything that's trolling. Sometimes you have to use it, and you have to be very strategic about it. But there are a lot of things I like about, I'd say Facebook's the worst. Facebook is the worst, most unhealthy form of social media we have right now.
It's tacky.
I don't think it really positively contributes to craft, really. Honestly, I don't. I think that most of the initiates I know who are all on these Facebook groups and stuff are some of the most uneducated and toxic of the bunch. Not all, of course. But it just happens to be the true, and it's created a social club to where they are trying to create the idea that they're in the in crowd, and if you're not in with them and they're bullying, you're not. And almost all the really good initiates I know avoid Facebook like the plague. If it wasn't for my businesses and things like that, I don't know that I'd be on it. But it has had some positive benefits too, like being able to contact people or have private conversations with initiates all over the world. That's been really great.
It is nice.
I prefer YouTube, I think. Instagram's really just pictures, isn't it? So, I think pictures can inspire. They're not bad in and of themselves. I think people who get all their craft from pictures, and that's how they feel they're contributing or interacting with other human beings, that's a bit weird for me, but it's not bad. It's not neither bad nor good. I can't really say anything about TikTok because I just look at it like it's a peculiar thing.
I don't use it. I don't know how to use it.
I know a little bit more about it.
It's like
I
the
teach
short
middle school,
version of YouTube, really.
I'm around TikTok a lot.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's positive or negative, but I think that the craft was never meant to bring everyone together. I think groups of initiates, whenever you get more than 13 initiates together for very long in any situation, it is going to be toxic.
Yes, correct.
So that's
what I miss is Witch Vox, the witch's voice.
Oh,
I thought that was a useful
that was
website.
Nice. Yeah, they just got sick of doing it. It was nice.
It was good for networking.
It was great. It promoted bad groups and good groups. So in that sense that it,
open season.
But in your area, you could find.
Well, I
places,
think I met you through that as well as Katina.
So I wish someone would start a new witch's voice.
There was somebody that did it. Unfortunately, a lot of people didn't join with it because the person is also into another religion, and they posted that on there. And it sort of was offensive because it's like, I don't want to put that I'm in this initiatory craft thing with another religion because it makes it look like it's the same thing, or that I'm supporting activities involved. So I think that was that person's mistake, is that they just really didn't fully dedicate it to what they're doing. And so I think a lot of initiates were turned off by that. It has been attempted. We thought about doing it. I don't have time for it.
Is there still
once again, you're inviting toxic. So.
They're not as popular anymore.
Meetups, you could search. In the old days, you had to search for groups, and there was
It's not hard to find groups if you look, really.
Right.
But that was a convenient phone book, wasn't it?
It was.
So, do we have any other questions or callers? Or I will.
No call right now. We had a few. I kind of wanted to address this one from This Old Witch podcast, which was we know that social media is a problem, but publishers sometimes, they're saying here that publisher has also made it worse because they've created easy button copy paste books over and over and over again.
God.
I think you're correct. I think it's interesting that they now take their marching orders from social media.
Right.
Because they have to sell books.
What are people clicking on?
The most? And it has. You're not wrong. It has created a really intense amount of awful sort of information that is just being spread like wildfire, and even in print. And you're absolutely right. It now takes its orders from social media.
That's what I meant by saying poor quality academic work. It's just driven by whatever the social commentary
Narrative
is
is.
instead
Yeah.
of
It's
really
very,
doing
very quick.
good research.
It's, agreed.
And if a new person's interested in witchcraft and they look at the bookshelf, God knows what they're going to dig out.
Well,
of
that's
these
one of
days.
the
It's
things.
Real junk.
I think we're really good about it in the stores, but one of the things we're attempting to do with
We are
Warlocks
good in the
Press,
stores.
even though we've only got 4 titles right now, is was my vision that I only want to publish things that the person has credentials. And I'd say that's my biggest advice to anyone, whether you're reading a book or whether you're following a podcast or whether you're, doing anything, joining a group, training with somebody, find out what their credentials are and know the red flags. If they're saying they learned it from a relative, that's just a really big red flag. And it's almost 99% of the time untrue.
Hereditary.
Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but it's usually not true.
Correct.
And if it is true, and the person's conveniently dead, then, you have no way of verifying that. When you have no way of verifying where they got that information from. So it could be so-and-so's grandmother made some stuff up and gave it to them. You just don't know. So that's not really a credential. That's an easy fairy tale. Mm-hmm. So whenever someone says, I learned it from my grandma or grandpa or whatever, they're probably lying. And even if they're not lying, that's not really a credential because you just don't know where the information came from. So if you're looking to train or read a book, know where did this person get their information from? And if you can't find that out, then there's a problem because nowadays there are credentials for all of these things. If somebody says they're into ceremonial magic, find out. Did you just read books? Did you create it yourself? Did you ever study with anyone? Who was that person? Were you ever in a lodge? What's your experience? These things have, all of these topics have actual sources of really traceable training now.
Right.
So, I don't like to read books from, when I pick up a book by a self-starting witch, I just am almost instantly uninterested because I know, I suppose if they're good at writing creative rituals, I find that mildly entertaining because that's just the talent of poetry or whatever, but it's all the same garbage, just regurgitated.
It's so boring after a while.
Yeah, it's just not interesting to me. I still don't understand how there could be another candle book ever written again. It's like
there's so many. What?
That's the cut and paste that you're talking
yes,
about.
it is.
Yeah, that is the witches. Yeah,
chunks of
and I
sales
also think
books
something that's coming up here. It's I don't want to. I'm not knocking it necessarily, but one of the things that I get very irritated with, and Brian mentioned this, where he said self-starter. So many people get offended when you ask them, well, where did you learn that? Have you worked in a group? Have you been in a lodge? Have you been in a coven? What is that? Why does that matter? Well, because I'm going to be really frank with you. It lets me know that you can't be that crazy, right? You know what I mean? Here's what I mean by that. It's kind of like how we prefer people who we're going to hire to have a little bit of work experience, even if it's unrelated, because we need to know that you can function in a group.
Yeah.
Because if you can't, because I'm going to go ahead and be a little harsh here. If every group you've ever tried to join kicked you to the curb and they didn't understand you, and this is the 5th, 6th, 7th group you've tried and you're still solitary, maybe it's you. Maybe it's you. And people need to hear that. Every now and then, that is the problem.
Not everyone is meant to be a priest or priestess of any religion.
No.
And it's perfectly okay to practice on your own. My joke that probably offends people, and you know how much that means to me, is that my only problem with solitary witches is they're not solitary enough. I can't stand these solitary witches who have to be, I'm solitary, I'm going to let you know I'm solitary, I don't need initiation, I don't need a group, and I'm here to tell you and everyone in public I'm solitary. I'm like, then go be solitary. If I was solitary, I would be by myself and not tell anyone.
I'd be in my cave,
but by the
screaming at God.
By the very campaign that they are driving is that they want acceptance from people. They want to be accepted as a valid witch that everyone should look up to, and they've done it all on their own, and they don't need anyone. And that's just not how the world works. It doesn't work that way in witchcraft. It doesn't work that way in business. It just doesn't work.
No, you got to have other people.
So, more power to you. Just
Like putting all your paintings under your bed and never showing them to anybody, right? You've got to have an audience.
Yeah.
You got to get
you do on some
somebody
level.
looking
You do.
at your work.
And yeah.
And I think we have to be able to sit in the classroom at the feet of good teachers with an attitude of, I'm here to learn and I don't know all this yet, so let me be quiet and pay attention and learn from people. I don't think we have enough respect for that.
And you know, something that I've said on the show before, but that fits into this conversation, I think, very well. I've had the privilege now, because of, my initiation and, Hex and all these other things, of meeting so many different types of practitioners.
Wow, me too.
And I will tell you a dirty little secret. Everybody thinks the initiates are the snobs. And I don't just mean Alexandrian Gardnerian. I mean OTO people and hoodoo initiates. Voodoo initiates or Santeria or whatever. That the big I initiatory people are always the snobs. Oh, no, ma'am. I've met thousands of practitioners because of, these opportunities. I can guarantee you, find yourself someone in a very rural town who is the only priestess on the market, and you will find somebody who is dripping in ego, who has declared themselves the king or queen of a very tiny realm. What they say is law. They usually have a little group of people who hang on to their every word. It's very tyrannical. It's full of misinformation. I guarantee you it is super common. So it's not always how people think, right?
It's also what's driving the ego, like we were talking about the aesthetics. If somebody's entire craft is about what they look like and stuff they made up, their driving force isn't service. Their driving force is, there are plenty of witches out there who are doing it just because they want to be famous, and that's their thing. This is my thing. This is what gets me attention on YouTube, or this is what gets me attention on whatever. Like, I can tell you right now, as much as I do enjoy admiration, especially of beautiful men, I never wanted to be famous. It's never been a driving force of mine. In fact, I find it unsettling.
I wanted to be famous.
But
Ellie's like, I would love to be famous.
Ellie is
I
famous.
always say I'm famous.
She does. She introduces herself. I'm Elie Barnes,
I'm Elie
famous
Barnes, famous
yeah.
psychic, famous painter. And I agree.
And a famous witch.
And a famous witch now, too. But I agree. The initiates and the serious practitioners and students are the most humble that we meet. Humble,
Agreed. 100%.
gracious,
100%.
polite, listening, observant, not putting their stuff out there.
And the small town Lord Gwendolyn Whitefire III, is always the worst.
Yeah.
She, and it's either he or she. It can be. There's no parody here of anything, but it's almost always they're the one who's like, well, actually, and it's always like, actually, no, sit down. Like,
I think where the
Tell 'em,
snobbiness comes from, and actually this goes on to a subject I want to ask you guys. So how or do some modern initiates yield the narrative to outsiders or kowtow to the masses? How do you feel that could be happening, and why, or is it happening?
It 100% is happening, and it needs to stop.
Tell us how. That's what I couldn't figure out. How do we know how that's going on?
Because we know, and I'm not naming names, but there are lots of public people who are known initiates of Alexandrian and Gardnerian craft who will kowtow to every single neo-pagan demand.
Okay.
They will not say things like initiation is mandatory, or this religion began as an initiatory religion, or we should have men and women in circles, period, or we should have expectations of students, or no, not every single thing you do needs to be validated by your high priest or high priestess. They will not do these things because they have to sell books and keep contracts, and I get it. But it has done massive damage to the image of the craft. They have fed, especially American Gardnerians, that narrative that witchcraft is a practice, but my religion is Wicca and it's separate from witchcraft. No. And the fact that they've ceded this ground is so shocking to me sometimes. And I just don't know why. Why would you do that? You don't win any brownie points. The neo-pagans are never going to like us. And so I don't think we need to try to be liked by them. I don't want to be liked by them.
I feel like the Catholic Church shouldn't change its dogma either. That's the religion, Catholicism. It's got its dogma. It believes in certain things. And it modified itself a lot in the last 25 years to appease the popular vote. I think it's fine to say, I don't want to be Catholic because I don't agree with them. Or, if you do agree
you vote with your feet.
Right?
That's what they say.
But that's what's happening in other religions.
You don't like it, you can walk.
They're
Interesting
modifying themselves.
The
to please the
modification
masses.
that the Catholic Church has undergone, which unfortunately didn't include getting their priests in line.
Right.
That's what they should have been focusing
Yes.
on. But all the modifications, like taking away the Latin Mass and things like that, that didn't help their numbers. It actually hurt. But Yeah, I see it happening too, and I think I'm with Levi. I think the problem I have is I don't get it.
Why? Why do you do this?
That's the thing I don't get. I don't understand how some initiates feel the need to push the word Wicca and kind of hush down on the word witchcraft or secede it. I even had initiates say, well, don't use it privately. But publicly they do. I don't use it privately. And that's the whole thing is I think we know that in initiatory circles, they're saying witchcraft, they're initiated as witches, they're using the word witchcraft. They do not really believe witchcraft is a practice, but publicly they will say it because they don't want to upset anyone. And what I find even more shocking about it is they have no problem upsetting other initiates.
I know.
So they'll say the cruelest, wickedest things to each other, but to the neo-pagans and all those people, it's, whatever, it's fine.
Yeah, we don't really believe.
I don't understand it, and those aren't the kinds of witches I'm around or the kinds of witches that I'm surrounded by. I've seen it so many times, and I don't understand the psychology of it, but I can say there are plenty of initiates out there who are also bitter ex-priests and ex-priestesses. So there are people out there who are, older now or who don't practice anymore or they're not in covens anymore, and they've turned bitter. And I think they sometimes think the craft isn't going on without them, and so there's that. And I also think that sometimes it's they've lost faith in whatever they were doing or it didn't work out for them, but they love to get on social media and try to lord their once prominent position over others. And so I think there's a lot of that going on, but that's the issue is that what you're seeing on Facebook is you're seeing a social club, and you're not getting correct information. But yeah, they do. They kowtow.
They kowtow constantly. And here's what I want to say, because Frank has a really good question I want us to address. Don't let me forget, either of you. But I do want to say one important thing. I have made some stark realizations about my own approach to religion and craft and my priesthood in the last 6 months. And it actually does, I will say, I understand why they sometimes do it, because it is separating. It is isolating to have the worldview that we do. Because in the modern millennial world, Gen Xers are this way too. You're Gen X. Gen X and millennials, our generational peeps or whatever, do not join things. They don't believe in isms. They're very postmodern. And so I talk to these people and I realize, this is not your calling. You don't live your life as a priest who also enjoys other things. This is one hobby for you amongst others. I'm an artist. I'm also a insert career title, and I also really enjoy ceramics. And I also
a crystal witch.
I run, and then I'm also a witch. And I just don't understand that. I view witchcraft the way C.S. Lewis described Christianity. He said, I don't worship God like I worship the sun. God is the sun through which I see all other things, right? I find that is my view of craft. My world is priesthood, and how I act as a teacher, my profession, how I act as a partner to my loving partner, how I act as a son, how I act as a human, a citizen. All of those are part of being a priest. I'm never not a priest. And these people are priests only when they cast a circle. Right. And I just can't.
The ones that are allowed to.
Exactly. oh, I just got that. Okay, so I'm going to let Elie and Brian answer this because I feel like I've been talking. But Frank asked, how can you, in Alexandrian craft, how can you distinguish watered down witchcraft and teachings? What are the identifiable hallmarks of authentic core Alexandrian craft? Like if you're a seeker.
I think that, obviously we've dedicated entire shows to this, so it's a very long, complicated answer. But first of all, training and teaching, training should be something to where your questions are getting answered, you're learning, you're actually learning new things, you're learning new techniques. I mean, that's just in any kind of teaching or training that should be happening. If they're telling you things you already know constantly, then you're really not learning anything. I think that there's enough voices out there. Maxine has done a lot of work publicly and written her book and what have you, and we've done work and other initiatives have done work speaking about what Alexandrians really believe and what we do. So that information is readily available, and if they're saying things that don't check off those boxes, that's probably a red flag. I'd say if you get any line or tradition that's added another word, like Chthonian or Green Witchcraft, or changed the practices, I wouldn't touch it with the 10-foot pole. I don't consider Chthonian Alexandrian witchcraft to be Alexandrian witchcraft. It's a new tradition that somebody who was Alexandrian created. And now you've got a nexus of people who are still using that title and saying, well, in our sect or in that sect, it's okay. And it's problematic because they've introduced same-sex initiation, which is just not a part of the religion of witchcraft. It's not that we're homophobic or anti. It's just kind of like Elie's saying, it's a core part of the belief that men are initiated by women and women are initiated by men. And, it's like a woman has a baby. There's just no changing that fact. Men are never going to have babies. So, you can argue with Mother Nature. But so we've got these certain core beliefs that may be unpopular or what have you, but there are beliefs. We believe in a god and a goddess. If you don't believe in that, this isn't the thing for you.
Nope.
We believe in initiation. We believe in working in covens. We believe in training. All of these things, this information is all readily available, and you do not have to agree with it. You don't have to do it. It just means it's not for you. It's, there's always going to be core Catholics. There still are. Where I grew up, there was a monastery that broke off from the Catholic Church because of the Latin Mass being taken away, and they formed their own sect and continued with the Latin Mass. So even if the true core is reduced to smaller fractions or numbers, there has always been good and bad covens in the craft, meaning that there are always covens that change things. I think they should be able to give you the source material for the information. I also think a red flag is if you have a teacher that never says, I don't know.
It's a red flag at anything.
Right.
And I think that's something to look for. Or I'm not sure, if they can't have that honest dialogue with you, they're probably not being honest. If they're experts at everything, if they've got a fun story about everything, and there's no real depth or trail to follow, it's a red flag. But you kind of have to learn that through trial and error. You gotta, if you're questioning someone, you're probably questioning them for a reason.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Answer this, Brian. Is it correct and true that any person that shows up as an Alexandrian priest or priestess and is running a coven would have an upline and would be able to give a new student exact information about their lineage?
They should be able to, yes.
Okay.
If that person's initiated, they may not give you everyone in their line before you're initiated, but certainly once you've been initiated, you should know exactly who they come from. Right. You should have it all the way back to the source. That should not be a question. It should be easily, readily information. Furthermore, if an initiate asks another initiate for that information, usually it's readily available because we're all initiated. So it's not like outing someone.
And we know who initiated us.
Yeah. Usually if people are, to quote my teacher, Val Hughes, if people are shady about the beginnings, they're probably shady.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think you got to do your research and know what questions to ask. There are going to be differences in lines, and there are going to be differences in covens, and not all information is passed to the same people. I think it's, I had a really amusing experience where someone wanted information from me and then assumed they could get it from just anyone. And I thought, well, you're making quite the assumption. You don't know who has what, and so I think that there's that assumption as well. So I can only tell you, where I was trained from and who I got my information from, and then I think that was a very credible source, one Val Hughes.
100%.
I think also good Alexandrian priests and teachers are really digging into the Book of Shadows. And you'll be copying your own version, your own copy of their book, and you should be seeing a lot of continuity with that.
Oh, yeah. Really big red flag. If you're a first degree initiate, you should be given your Book of Shadows. In other words, you copy it, you get to bring it home.
Yes.
If they're putting it in a safe,
nope.
If they're not letting you have it because you're not the right degree, that run. Don't walk. All first degree witches should copy their own Book of Shadows from their teachers. No line.
Right.
If somebody's changed that, it's because they're doing something non-craft.
And it's shady and controlling and creepy.
It's also against the very book that they're giving you.
Yeah, it's very creepy.
Yeah.
They're breaking.
And we have known this
a
to
black and
happen.
white
I've known Alexandrian initiates that weren't given the first book because the teacher was saying they could only have it when they were a 3rd degree, and guess what? She didn't have the book. And I know of a Gardnerian coven who had someone copy their Book of Shadows and kept it in a safe. So people do this, but they're not supposed to.
No. So beware of things like that as well. You know, to Frank's question, like, you know, super hyper controlling is often because they're afraid that you're going to find out that the emperor is naked.
Or that somebody else is going to find out.
Because that the emperor is naked and they can't let anybody know.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing that a lot of times hyper control is born out of the fear that they're going to be found out. That they don't know what they're talking about, or that they've changed something dramatically. And so that's another red flag to look out for, Frank, and everyone who's watching. Hyper controlling usually means hyper unaware of the actual truths. So be careful.
If people are sincere students, even, you know, because all priests and priestesses should be students forever. You know, if I didn't know something, I would contact one of the elders and ask them. You know,
and also,
they
because
could do
he
it
can,
too.
he knows them.
But the people who don't do it, it's because they don't want to admit that they don't know anything because they've pulled on a charade for too long.
Know them.
Yeah,
or they don't actually know them and wouldn't be welcome at the door.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And that's another red flag.
One Gardnerian priest who's running around telling everyone just a few years ago that he talked to Patricia Crowther on the phone every day. I said, yeah, right.
It's just not true.
An American she's going to talk to on the phone every day in her 90s. You know, it's just obviously not true.
No, it's we always return to freedom. Exactly, Frank. Like, it's a big part of it too.
But it's a fun fairy tale to weave to your victims, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think we've got some calls.
No, that was the past one.
Okay.
That was the past one.
Why are there two?
Somebody hung up.
All right.
No, it was for 1 second.
All right.
Call back.
We'll
I'll
go
answer
with
you.
another question.
Robocall.
What are some of what is the worst book or worst books you can think of that spread misinformation about craft?
Elie, I'll let you go first.
Elie, hate.
Well, no, the most common one I think we all say is Scott Cunningham's Solitary Wicca. I mean, he and I don't know him, you know, so I'm not.
He's dead.
I know, but I'm not speaking personally about him. I don't know him. But that's an example. I know his book on herbalism is really a hodgepodge of books he read and copied things. He didn't do a lot of herbal research. We don't use it as a standard reference today. Herbalists don't really use it as a standard reference. So many people bought his books. They were in every bookshop, and you just took them home, and that's what everybody did in the 80s. Scott Cunningham style witchcraft.
He was downline from the Wellens, that's why.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the question? I forgot.
The worst books.
The worst books. Let's see, what else is really horrible?
Careful.
Well, I don't know. There's some, I don't know. I'm still going to say that. I don't buy the worst books. I don't know what they are. I can open that first page and go, meh.
I have to say, I think the most damaging book was probably Scott Cunningham's book. And the reason why is because it was so popular, you know, and, you know, you hear people say, well, it did me good, it got me going. And to be honest with you, I mean, maybe it did for a couple people, but I don't know how, you know, I think for a lot of people, it was the beginning and the end. You know?
Yeah,
I just think it started the whole idea that you can make it up as you go along. And I think what I disliked about it the most was that it was a book of lies. You know, he stated it as if this is a fact, you know, and what he was basically doing is making himself the Pope of witchcraft and putting out all these decrees. He didn't have the credentials. You know, he wasn't an initiate. And at that time, he, you know, eventually started working with Llewellyn, who was downline from Lady Sheba, which could tell you a lot about why those books are the way they are today. And so I think there was a bitter agenda there as well through Llewellyn at the time that wasn't really favorable towards industry craft because they had been found out to be sort of fraudulent, you know, and even if that wasn't their fault and it was, you know, Lady Sheba making stuff up, it probably stung, and instead of pursuing training somewhere else, they just sort of hung on to it. So I can't speak to all their motives, but, you know, early on he said he was a Hawaiian shaman, and the next thing you know, he was writing that book. You know, changed so many things because of the popularity. I guess I could say it's good that people aren't interested in it anymore. Don't hear a lot of people praising it anymore.
You don't. I would say actually part of the biggest ones, and this is not well known to everyone, there is some author, and if you know it, please drop it in the comments on Facebook or YouTube, because I forget, somebody who goes by a pseudonym who's written hundreds
the newer ones
witchcraft books on Amazon.
I don't think it's a real person.
I don't think it's a real person either.
No, there's a trend of they're making up fake authors.
Yes, and they give 99 cents a pop on Kindle, and they've sold tons of copies, and they are the worst kind of it makes Scott Cunningham look like a PhD. Like it's a whole thing, and they're poisonous. I mean, they have become a serious problem. Yeah. We do have a caller, but it has become an absolute Lisa something. Yes, it is Lisa something.
I don't think it's a real person.
No, it's not. It's a total pseudonym.
They've come up with a bunch of different ones that have fake author names and fake. It's all made up.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's just so disappointing.
It is, and it is wildly popular, Elie.
Because they don't know. People
going
don't
back
know.
to the people that just don't know. They're just new to the whole idea of witchcraft, and they're just finding whatever is accessible, and then they start
Chamberlain Derek, yes, I think so, something like that. But yeah, they're like everybody knew it. Everybody knew it. It's a big deal on Amazon, guys.
I've seen posts about it, but I didn't know. Sorry.
You okay? Yeah, I feel like we're a little can of sardines in here.
A can of sardines. I like sardines. Okay, so we do have a caller.
Cushion.
Hi, you're on Covendom.
Hi, this is Carrie.
Hi, Carrie.
I have a question. Hi. I wrote it down. Hold on just a second. I was trying to plug in my devices. My phone was dying in my tablet. So today I was actually randomly reading about fairies, and it was saying that the fairies, like in the Fae land or whatever, that they are actually fallen angels.
Yeah, that's
and I was
a common
wondering,
belief.
I'm sorry, what?
That's a very common belief in Irish folklore. If you read a lot of Irish, I actually just finished a book on the Fae, an academic book called The Good Folk. It's a very good book. It's a very common belief amongst Irish peasants and the Irish churchgoers that the Fae represented fallen angels that had left heaven but had not been put in hell. Yeah, it's
There
common.
was a crossover of a time when the Celtic belief and the Christian beliefs were merging. So there was also a belief that, for instance, purgatory was where the fairies were.
Yep.
So there was a mixed, a mix of these traditions that were, they were becoming Catholics, but they were still holding on to some of their pre-Christian roots. The fairy faith kept going, still exists today within.
Or that they were the pagan dead. There's lots of origin stories for the Fae. Yeah.
Okay.
There's no canonical.
So I was curious about you guys' opinion about this. Like, okay, so like the typical characteristic of fairies being like kind of sadistic or tricksters or whatever is that they supposedly lead people astray, like cartography wise, like literally lead them astray, and so they get lost. Do you think that because okay, hold on, I wrote some notes down. Okay, wait, company. Oh, do you think that has something to do with like the fallen concept of Lucifer and him being taken down to the material world, and like the fairies kind of working in their land on our land to bring about destruction, like more destruction and less fertility?
Yeah, I'm gonna stop you there. No, I also like. The thing is we're not.
I don't think I'm wording it right.
No, it's fine. We're just not representatives of the fairy faith. I do actually love the fairy, like the concept of the fae, but I think it is a little bit strayed from what we're talking about. So
when you're talking about something like fairies too, a fairy is a very broad term. So the craft and the fairy faith do have an intermingling because of the fact that our cult came up in Britain, quite frankly. So, but it's, when you're saying fairies, you can be talking about gods, you can be talking about ancestors, you could be talking about elementals, you could be talking about all kinds of things. And then you have a crossover between cultures. You've got the Germanic sort of Saxony elves, and then you've got, the Welsh, and you've got the Irish Sidhe. So there's not really one thing. There certainly were some mythologies of fairies that were darker, and there were mythologies of fairies that were very helpful. So they could be very positive, or they could be somewhat negative. And it's really a complicated subject because it traverses hundreds and
I would
hundreds
never
of
put
years.
fairies in the same realm as gods, though. Like, it would be like gods.
But they were at
They
one
were
point
gods,
in time.
actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
If you study Irish mythology, you will find that some of them were gods.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. But
it was so random when I saw it. I was like, what? Because I was just looking at, like, a cute fairy, like a picture of one, and I was like, oh, I haven't Wikipedia'd a fairy in a while. And
Totally.
when I started reading stuff,
what
I
do
was
you
like,
think?
well, this could be a little bit more sadistic than they're saying,
I think we lost her.
What do you think the Alexandrian take would be on the idea of fairies? Is
Well,
there even a commentary?
we do
about
have
it?
rituals
Okay.
and materials with fairies.
Okay.
Yeah.
The fairies, it's they do exist in a certain sort of thing, but it's such a broad term.
Yeah.
And fairy is like the English component of like the French fae, right?
Yeah.
It's a very complicated term. When you're talking about fairies, you're basically talking about pre-Christian spirits.
Yep.
Which could be anything from an elemental to a god to an ancestor, and it depends on the culture. It's very varied.
The Sidhe were absolutely gods.
Yeah,
It
the
literally-
original. Yeah,
they're literally the entire mythology of them is they were the pagan gods driven under the earth.
Yeah.
I mean, point blank, they're gods, right? But the word fairy got applied to lots of things besides the Sidhe, right? I actually really love fairy lore. I don't know why I was kind of like snarky about it earlier.
If
I
you're
do love it.
interested in it, there's a book called The Fairy Faith
In the Celtic country.
Yes, that's
counties,
the
yeah.
best book. Yeah.
And there's also a couple of really good academic ones out now. Like I said, The Good Folk. If you're
But
really
to
into it.
Levi's point, we don't specifically worship fairies or specifically work with fairies, but I do believe in them. So
I enjoy them as an archetypal divine thing, absolutely. Like I love the concept of them. I like Celtic mythology a lot, though, a lot. So I have a question here. How do you feel about non-pagan folk practitioners and the difference between the practices in modern day? I'm guessing what they mean by this is people who practice folklore or whatever, but they're not actually doing
folk magic. Or
yes, but they're not actually doing it in the old way.
I think
they
they're
could be
folk
Christian.
magicians. That's what I think. They're folk
They
magicians.
could be Christian and still
That's what-
using
yeah.
an older,
I consider
superstitious
it's folk
technique or
magic. You could
something.
call them folk magicians. Some people classify hoodoo as that. Some people classify conjure as that. These are just magical practices that are compilations of their locality usually. So in Ireland, it might be an Irish Catholic performing folk magic, even if they don't think of it as magic. Why am I looking at that? You get it all over the world. And a folk magic means magic of the people. It's a crossover between actual magic and superstition, depending on what, is it a horseshoe? Is that a spell? Or is it a superstition? So it's I think it's more glorified currently than it has been 100 years ago. But I do think that it's fine. It's not a religion. Magic isn't a religion of itself,
Yes. I wanted to go back and very quickly, I think we can answer this one because it has been asked a lot on this show, but why I think it's one that we always can answer. Diana's asking, what are books you recommend for seekers if we're trying to avoid watered down? I mean, I'm going to recommend Brian's,
Right,
obviously.
right. Me too. I think that's a great...
Initiation into Witchcraft, Brian Cain.
Well, it's particularly good if you're interested in our line of witchcraft.
In initiatory craft. I'm also going to recommend the books of Maxine Sanders. I'm going to recommend the books of our elders, Gerald Gardner.
Doreen Valente.
Yeah, Doreen Valiente.
Try to read books that were written before, the 80s.
Yeah.
It's once you get into the 90s, things really get watered down a lot for a long time. I feel like it's only within the last few years that we started getting some good material again.
Right.
There's and the problem is we're constantly bashing. It sounds like we're bashing Llewellyn. It's because we lived through it, or some of us did. That watering down. They were a product of. it was a product of their own success. Like their success was also what destroyed them. They got so popular that, you know, things like Hastings or Barnes and Nobles had entire sections dedicated to Llewellyn. Llewellyn was doing really well, and it had its positive sides, you know, but we watched it happen. Eventually, you know, it's like they had to start inventing witchcraft just to sell books. And
Types
so they
witchcraft.
run out of
So many
traditions, or run out of traditions willing to publish, and so they started doing this ethnic thing where it was German witchcraft, Saxon witchcraft, Irish witchcraft, you know. And quite frankly, there's just no such thing as any of those things, you know, not in the way that they were doing it. But it started this sort of something we would actually find very toxic now, but we weren't thinking about it then. It started this weird ethnic, like your religion should be your ethnic heritage.
Genetically.
And I think that that's still going on today, and it's really has its, you know,
It's a bit creepy.
it's very destructive.
It's very odd.
I think it's very toxic to, in most cases, I think it's very toxic to tie your beliefs about God to your genetic material.
I do think it's dangerous. I also think it's just very separate from what we're doing. We're initiatory. It's like we're like a Lucis. Anybody could be initiated at a Lucis as long as you could speak Greek and understand the
predominantly
prayers.
believe in forms of reincarnation, you know.
Yeah, it didn't matter. It was not an ethnic faith. You just had to be able to understand the prayers and recite the formula. If you could do that in Greek, in Koine Greek, you were good. You know, and I think we're similar to that. You know, we're not an ethnic religion. Thank God us.
And so an initiated witchcraft can't be appropriated. It either is or isn't.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
You can't take it from another culture.
No.
Right.
I mean, folk magic absolutely exists in every culture.
Right.
And of course, there are those people who, you know, I'm a witch, I like candles, you know, and so maybe if they're an Irish witch, they light a candle with a horseshoe and a shamrock, you know, but to us, it's silly. So
yeah, you shouldn't. It's just not a part of it. It feels very foreign to me. Shane said something I wanted to go back to here. The detriment of all this is having to unlearn things, right? And it takes a long time to empty that cup. This is true, I think.
Not if you've always been a snob.
That's true. But I think it's part of the problem now. It's like I've had people in classes, even when I just teach like traditional astrology, you know, like when I taught on the Art Cosmic, people will say things to me like, well, actually, and I'm like, no, this is traditional astrology. We don't use Uranus and Neptune and, you know, et cetera. And they're just horrified. And they're like, no, I know that, you know, I read in this and I saw in this blog. And I'm like, so you don't want to actually learn anything. Like you don't want to learn a new system or a system you don't know. It's like, you're right, Shane, everyone is unlearning.
I just wanted to talk to you about it.
Yeah, you just wanted to talk at me.
And stepping on something.
Right, and not learn anything. And ooh, I hate that.
So before we take a call, because I think we have another one, I have a question I want to make sure I get to ask you guys, which was, you know, talking about the watering down of witchcraft, or, you know, how it's been diluted or hasn't been diluted or can be diluted. What are, in your opinion, what is a wrong reason or set of reasons to pursue craft?
Wrong reasons to pursue the craft. Elie?
Like people who think they want to get into witchcraft, but they're doing it for reasons that you might find.
Gosh, there's just probably hundreds of them. You know, it's popular. It's rebellious. Other people are doing it, so we want to jump on the bandwagon. Wrong reasons. Well, of course, we would say like beauty, power, popularity are all the wrong reasons. People just don't have any idea.
I don't think beauty and power are the wrong reasons. Those are like tenets of Alexandrian craft.
But
beauty, power, and freedom, Elie. Beauty, power, and freedom.
I just meant it like in the popular
I know
way.
what you mean.
Yeah.
But these people hang on to that stuff.
Yeah. And just having something to do. I don't know.
Social. That's the wrong reason to join a coven is because you're bored and you want friends.
I think I ruined your train of thought.
You know, or you need new friends.
Yeah, you need new friends. That's the worst reason.
Because I absolutely got into this for beauty and power.
But I know what she meant. She meant like just because you want to be popular on Instagram, right? But I think the wrong reasons are definitely
beauty, power, and freedom.
Yeah, those are the right reasons. The wrong reasons are like I want friends and I want us to all go to the woods together. And I remember one time
social
at Hexfest I was teaching, and this woman in and I really didn't want to be mean to her because she was super kind, and she said, "I'm really proud because I've kind of started a coven. Me and the girls get together on Wednesdays and we drink tea and we talk about what we're sort of doing in our lives."
When did this happen?
This was in a panel at Hexfest one year, and I was like, and I couldn't validate
Was
that.
this person on the panel?
No.
Okay.
They were, and I didn't want to be rude because I was like, she wasn't being snotty. She was being very kind, and she was sharing this
old
moment.
lady.
You just say
No.
that's a tea party, lady.
No,
That's
it's
a tea
exactly, but
party.
that's just a tea party.
I probably would have
It's not a
said something
coven.
like
Like, how much do we have to kowtow to social niceties now that somebody's like, I bought a book and I'm a witch and you have to buy. No. Like, for God's sake.
I don't think we should ever apologize for our religious beliefs.
Thank you.
I think
I'm
one
so
of
tired
the
of it.
things that people need to realize is that the separation between church and state is not only vitally important, but it exists. I think a lot of people think that, we should somehow regulate religious beliefs based on the social standards we put in our societies, and they just don't go hand in hand necessarily. People get to believe whatever they want about God, and it's none of our business. That's why we have different religions. And if we agreed with all these religions, we'd all be one religion, But today there are people who are in all kinds of different faiths that have beliefs that I don't agree with. There's people who don't believe in anything. That's all okay. You can't regulate people's beliefs. So I don't think you should ever apologize for what you believe in. That's ridiculous.
No, and
And
think
if you
there's a
have
lot
to
of that.
hide what you believe and you're ashamed of it, that is also a bit problematic, isn't it?
I just think it's become such a thing now that, like we talked about earlier, even a couple initiates, but definitely a lot of people who use the label witchcraft fall over themselves to make sure they're like, now nothing I say applies to the world, and none of this might be real, and
it's all, we're all good. We're not doing any harm.
yeah, nobody's bad, and nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong ever. And I'm just like, what a terrible worldview. Like, what a postmodern, selfish, individualistic, libertine ethic. Like, ew. Like
one of the things I love about witchcraft is when I'm worshiping, I obviously don't want to just be by myself all the time. I love working in a group, not for social reasons, but as a check and balance, and because I definitely, in my religious view on things, feel that there is a necessity for me to be working with at least one woman. Right? I wouldn't want to be in a group with a bunch of men, as much as I love men. Sorry, I need my ladies in my craft. And, that's all well and good, but I also like the intimacy and the purity of a small group. And I think that is, one of the things that gravitate. I wouldn't want to be in some mega church.
No.
Of anything. It's, to me, it loses something.
There's no direct interaction.
Yeah.
no.
So,
And what's the point?
You know what else I've
but
said?
different strokes for different folks.
No, some strokes are wrong. I can't be nice about this anymore. I'm so tired of it. Like, what a world of just mediocre, nothingness. Like, your only religion now is late-stage consumerism and Netflix binges. Like, God help us.
As he drinks his little Nestle Pure Water.
Oh, I'm guilty of it. I'm here. I'm aware of what hell I live in.
You got geyser water. You got geyser water. I also think, I've said this to Brian and Levi on occasion, when I work alone, and we all work alone some of the time because we're practicing and praying and doing different things that we just do on a daily basis in our own lifestyle, our own home, because we're not seeing each other every single day, every week, but not every day. We raise an incredible amount of power as a group, and that's pretty. They're writing and talking without me.
No, we're not talking about you.
That is pretty amazing, palpable, the power we raise in our group, and how I think why it's better than just working by yourself too.
Absolutely. No, Elie's right. And it's also, I meant what I said, guys. Like, I think at some point when you've been an initiate for a while, for me, it's been a minute, right? It's been a minute. And it's definitely, been longer for a lot of other initiates I know. I'm still, in some ways, not even as experienced as I should be. But I know enough to say this, which is when you live your life as a priest, when you live your life as an initiate, you couldn't imagine really the idea of going in front of a crowd and saying, but nothing I believe really matters. I've experienced the living Godhead with other people in worship and raised power through it. Whether you believe that or not is irrelevant to me, but it's happened. And I'm not going to be like, but none of that's real because I don't want to hurt your feelings.
If I were to have experiences that were just by myself or on my own, and no human being could validate that experience in any way, shape, or form, it wouldn't be a story worth telling, because no one would believe you. You just sound delusional, and you might be, because you're the only one that had that experience. But when you go into the magic circle with witches, and you have that shared experience of knowing that the goddess came that night, that she was ever present, and you all felt it, and you all received an experience, and then the magic worked, and the manifestations happened. There's that shared validation. There's that shared experience, and you can check each other out on each other's BS too, because once in a while we will get that person who comes up with that little delusion, and we're just like, nope, sorry.
Yeah,
No, that's you're crazy.
But we can check the work after the fact, several months after the fact, sometimes when we've worked some ritual magic and it works.
And I'm not counting out people having private personal experiences. You just can't expect other human beings to accept them, nor could I expect any of you to accept what's happened in a magic circle you weren't a part of, so that's something that's that's what makes a coven, not the tea.
Not the tea.
Right.
Not the tea.
Right.
Shady or sipped.
Yeah.
But I legitimately, it's just, that is the one difficulty I will say I have about doing Covendom, is sometimes I don't even know how to relate to this idea of like trying to, when people are like, well, what about my solitary, non-religious, non-deity focused, coin magic that I invented? And I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do with that.
It's just not, I think that, this comes up again over and over and over again, and I don't think people understand me, and I think other initiates and practitioners sometimes find it weird, but I think the inclusive idea we have in society is great. It's great, It's great that we're promoting not to beat up the gays. Don't beat me up.
Big fan, please don't.
It's great that we're focusing on female equality, and I think witchcraft would support all these ideas. But I think that when it comes to like things like religious belief or a coven structure where every group is autonomous, these things are not inclusive on their own. They're just, by the very nature of it, religion is not inclusive. Like there's no religion on earth that's like technically speaking 100% inclusive, because they have some sort of structure, means of indoctrination, and you have to believe what they're believing. And, if you don't, then try going and sitting into a mass and start swearing and see what happens. There's or show up in a bikini, see how that's received. There's so many things that we want to sort of blanket over, and I think when it comes to the world of witchcraft or these sort of things that exist in our countercultures or subcultures, we are apologizing for functioning in that way. And so there's this general idea that's been created that we're all one thing. Just because somebody calls themselves a witch doesn't mean we have anything in common. It just does not. The only thing we may have in common is that we're both using that word to describe ourselves. And that's okay. But it doesn't make us the same thing. We're not in the same club. I'm not in a club. I'm in a coven. And if you're not in that coven with me, you're not in that coven with me. And that's where my nucleus really exists. I can relate to people in my tradition who are in their own covens, but even they are separate from me. They're not included in my coven. What's going on in my coven is what's going on in my coven, and the only people that really know that are the people who've circled with it or are in it currently. So I think that this idea that, to what Elie was saying earlier, all this paganism, I mean, that's a perfectly good example. Paganism isn't a thing. You could be a Viking racist, you could be a loving Freya worshipping hippie, and it may sound similar, but it is not the same thing. It's just a general form of expression that people are using today, and the word witch has been watered down like the word pagan.
Right.
A lot of people who say they're pagan, or who say they're Wiccan, or who say they're a witch are relatively all saying the same thing. And obviously within our tradition, that's not either words we use or what we mean when we use them.
They mean that they are moving away from Christianity and that they're exploring or interested in pre-Christian or other than Christian, Western style, other than Christian religious experience.
That's all they. Yeah.
And I see them all day long, and they sit down with me and they say, "Guess what? I'm a witch. I'm a pagan. I don't think I want to be Christian anymore." And I, work with them really sincerely about that. Nothing wrong with it. But it is very general and very loose, and I think we're using it as an alternative to what we're offered in the United States is pretty much Christianity.
I have absolutely nothing in common with an Odinist.
No.
Other than the fact that we both may not be praying to Jesus.
We have in common with billions of humans.
I'm also not praying to Buddha, or meditating to him. So, that's it. That's all we have in common. Like, we don't have anything in common.
No, but we get lumped together under these umbrella terms. I agree. It's very odd because, it's almost like saying a Mormon in Utah is the same thing as a Russian Orthodox monk. No, they're not. And I don't care that they're both called Christian by certain people. They are not the same thing.
No.
We do have a caller. Would you like me to answer? Hi, is this Diana?
Hello. Good evening.
Hi, Diana.
Hello. I just want to take a second to thank you all so much for doing this. As someone who is currently solitary right now, unfortunately, until I find a coven, I just want to honor you guys for us solitaries in the meantime, for all the information and time that you're giving out to us to help us. I do have two questions.
Sure. What's your first question, Diana?
The first one is for someone who can't find a coven yet. What do you recommend for a seeker, if you can, for them to what are some things they can continue to do so that they can continue to hone their skills?
Do you want me to go first?
I can't.
Let's let Elie go first.
Yeah, Elie can go
I
first.
would like to say that the first thing that came into my head is that to hone our skills, there are many subsets of things to study and learn, like herbalism or astrology, or energy healing, and that people don't pay too much attention to some of those things. But there's plenty of room and plenty of good books and research to educate yourself in the skill sets of witchcraft, divination.
Yeah.
Working on your psychic development, working on cleaning up your energy body, working on being able to focus your mind for more than 2 or 3 minutes at a time, sitting and doing devotional work to your deities. I mean, there's a lot we can be doing, and also to become more knowledgeable on some specifics, like I said, like herbalism and correspondences, planetary energies, because we use those things. They aren't our initiatory information, but we use our knowledges in these different fields all the time. So that's a good thing to be doing in with your time.
Brian speaks about this in Initiation into Witchcraft, which I do recommend for seekers. And I agree with what he says in it, which is working with the god and goddess of witchcraft is something that you do while you're looking for a coven, like the concept of the horned god and the goddess of the moon, the gods of magic, like that, duotheistic concept, particularly the goddess, working on that as an image, tapping into that, honoring that. That's a huge part of it too, tapping into the cycles of the moon, into the cycles of the seasons and the Sabbats in whatever area you live in. That's also a really powerful way to do it too.
Love that. Definitely.
Absolutely. Not trying to get too personal here, but I do work with Hecate. And it has been a little bit difficult because, I do live in, the countryside. So I'm not in, a really busy city area where covens are pretty well known in this area. But hopefully she'll help me with that. So I definitely feel that. And one thing that you did say earlier about true seekers wanting to know, where the real power is, because there's so much misinformation that thankfully I feel have strong enough discernment to know that this doesn't feel right. I don't think this is truly of the old ways. So thank you.
Brian, what would you add to that?
Well, I would just say, you know, what people need to realize, and I think it's easy to forget, that, you know, we all started out as non-initiates, and we all probably started out alone. Solitary isn't always a lifestyle choice. Sometimes it's a set of circumstances. You know, I'm speaking when I'm poking fun at solitary more of the people who wear it as a badge of honor. We've all been solitary. We've all, you know, when I first moved to New Orleans, I had to leave my coven and come here and be by myself. And I was by myself for about a year. But it wasn't because it was a lifestyle choice. It was just because of a set of circumstances. So it does happen. It will happen. The natural state of a human being is to be alone at times. You know, I think it's just important to realize that, you know, because there is so much information out there, you know, yes, there's a lot of misinformation, but there's a lot of good information out there too. You know, we started writing books in the 50s. It's been a lot of year to write a lot of good books as well. And I absolutely say, look at the elders and what have you. So because of that, you know, a lot of people can genuinely practice the religion of witchcraft without being initiated or being a priest or a priestess. And I see no reason not to go on that. You know, I definitely believe if something doesn't resonate or feel right to you, it probably isn't. I think that when approaching any kind of religious caste or religion in general, you know, you've got to match up with the one that does resonate with you. If the craft doesn't resonate for someone, it's probably not their path. You know, so I don't think you can make the craft bend around you based on your feelings. But, you know, for me personally, it all matched up. You know, I didn't have anything in craft that didn't feel right to me. You know,
Absolutely.
Nowadays I encounter it partially based on the fact that I might know a thing or two now.
Did that answer your questions, Diana?
Yes. I do have one more, if that's okay. This is something that I feel like is not really talked about too much. But what are some top dangers of misuse of the craft, or dangers from using wrong information that you guys can probably, you know, warn us seekers about that are not initiates but are trying to hone our skills?
Well, I think that one thing is that people, and this is coming with the watering down too, people don't realize that the occult can be dangerous. You know, we have encountered people who had access to good training who have damaged themselves at times.
Yes.
Because they start meddling with things they shouldn't be meddling with, or they start invoking things that they shouldn't be invoking, or playing with forms of magic they shouldn't be playing with. I'd say the most dangerous thing that any occult practitioner has to deal with is their own ego. And when there was a caller earlier that was talking about fairies leading you astray, well, I think that could be a metaphor for your ego, leading you down places you shouldn't be going. You know, so I think that if you're going to practice the arts magical, I mean, no one can stop you. But if you're doing without training, I say just be very careful. Every magical system comes with some sort of contract, you know, and you know what contract you're signing before you get involved, you know. Once you start making those fairy offerings, you're stuck with them for life.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yes. Right.
Elie, what would you add to that?
You can also use good sense in looking at teachers and books and dealing with other people that you might run across in your seeking. I just have high standards for people. They need to be on time. They need to be well-mannered. They need to but be non-manipulating or trying to control you. And you should be looking out for weird things that you would already not like. Like if they said, meet me someplace, but don't tell anybody where you're going. Don't bring your phone. Bring some rope. You know, you might say the little red light might go off, and you're like, I don't know about this guy. Maybe this might get a little bit, you know. So I mean, use your own common sense and good judgment.
Agreed.
To assess things morally strongly. Don't let me forget. I have a really good question for both of you based on what Diana is asking us.
Did we answer both of those though, Diana?
Yes, thank you all so
Thank
much.
you so
I honor
much.
you. Thank you.
Goodbye. Have a great day. questions.
I want to ask you guys a question. How important is it to you that we train very high quality priesthood in initiatory witchcraft so that more covens can come into being of our style?
How
important is it to you?
That we propagate?
Yes, I don't love that word, but because it's very slow motion. We're wanting to create the highest
difficult. I guess because one of my passions has been attempting to be a good craft teacher.
Yeah.
That's been one of my goals. That one of the ways that you can see the fruition of that is it happening. But I'd rather it not happen than have bad ones. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I wouldn't try to spread them out. Levi is starting his own coven.
Yep.
And I'm very happy about that. He's got a loose group of people that he's working with who may or may not become initiates. He's still currently working with the New Orleans Coven, but he has that work in progress, and we're in great communication about it. And I'm very happy about that because I know that there will be 2 Alexandrian covens in New Orleans from our line, and I know Levi will teach 100% the craft. Right. And he's not going to muddy the waters. He's not going to, he's going to be a true high priest and servant of the tradition, and so I'm very proud about that. Elie's a bit twisted. She's going to stay and work with me, so she's.
I'm used to Brian at this point. I'm used to Brian.
I'm used to it. I'm used to it.
So it's nice to see. It's nice to see that fruition, but I'd rather. I'd rather
high quality.
If that's the only one that ever happens, I'll be proud. Very, very nice. But it's nice when it can happen. That's how the craft goes on.
But do you feel it's important?
I think it will happen because it has happened. What we have to remember is that, and one of the reasons why I believe in the initiation and the power of succession that flows through Gardnerian and Alexandrian witchcraft is because they have propagated. They have continued.
Right.
There are, in every line that exists, all the good, pure ones, they keep going on. They just do. And maybe we dwindle down like weeds occasionally, but we spring right back up. We do. I think that's always been the cycle of the craft. So I think it's going to happen anyway, and in the right individuals, the craft's going to generate itself in the right individuals. And it is nice to be a part of that work, to have been a part of that work, I'm very blessed with the elders and the teachers that I've had, and so it's nice to continue in that work. Mm-hmm. But I think it would be a mistake to try to generate it too quickly, or sometimes in the wrong individuals.
In the wrong hands, of course.
Yeah, which is going to happen as well, but it takes care of itself usually.
How important?
I've come to find that the trash takes itself out. It just does. Yeah.
Have another cherry.
It does. The trash does take itself out. I think it's important only in the sense that it should, like Brian said, it happens organically. I think that's when it's important.
Don't worry, we'll still do the show together.
Yes. Covendom's still on. I'm not leaving the band. I'm just The
band's not breaking up.
No. There's just I legitimately think that it happens when it's supposed to happen. It happens naturally and organically. I agree with Brian. I think forcing it, or putting stock in the wrong people, or doing it too fast, I think that actually ends up hurting us in the long run.
And you'll just get disappointed.
Yeah, it just hurts it in the long run.
Teachers get disappointed. It's inevitable. That would be one big thing I'm going to tell you. You'll get just as many disappointments as you'll get, rave reviews for, I guess.
Exactly.
It's eventually going to happen. If you do not get disappointed as a teacher, you're not teaching enough.
No.
And that from the secular teaching as well.
Yeah,
so.
In my secular teaching, where I just stare at the wall and I'm like, wow, it's just
hopeless. This isn't the year.
This is not my year.
Yeah.
But then you get back on the horse and you try again.
He probably has years where there's like a bunch of brilliant kids, and he probably has years where there's a whole classroom of like none of these.
We're doing our best, though.
Yes.
We're doing our best.
All right.
Keep the faith.
But yeah, I mean, you go through it, so it is what it is. But I think it's important, but I don't think we have to worry about it.
Yeah, I like what Tess said here. You don't train with the thought of proliferation. It's the natural consequence of good training.
That's nice.
Yeah, it is. That's exactly it. Like, it should be a consequence of a good coven, not the goal.
Yeah. There have been a few lines that really tried to spread their seed, and it shows. It shows.
I felt it was important for me at this point to publicly say what I practice and what I believe, and not hide under a rock about it. I am famous. I am well known. So I talk to a lot of people all the time.
I'm famous.
And they're like, "What do
says.
you do? What do you believe? Tell me about your witchcraft practice." So it's really nice to say I'm part of an initiatory system, Alexandrian witchcraft, which is very specific, and I think it's really helped me. I think it's been good. And then people can at least look it up and read a little bit about it and know what it is overall, basically. And to differentiate it from general paganism and general Wicca, which is all over the place.
Well, we've only got 10 minutes left, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay.
We will be back next week. Our next show is going to be on the topic of American witchcraft. Levi came up with this one.
I did.
I think it's going to be great. And very amusing for our UK brothers and sisters.
Yes, I'm going back to Appalachia for Christmas too, so I'm kind of in that headspace to talk about American folklore and American witchcraft.
Yeah, so we're going to do all those things.
I have a good
Come on, do the
personal
accent for us.
I'm not
just
doing the
once.
accent. I'm never doing the accent.
I've never heard it.
No,
It's
it's not. It's heavy.
He won't do it for me, not even offline.
Everybody's asking when Ellie's going to write a book.
When are you? We do need you to write a book.
Ellie's
Ellie is
working
working
on a great herbalism.
You should
book.
call it Goddess of the Earth.
Goddess of the Earth.
And I shouldn't give you names online because someone will go right. Christopher
right,
Pinzak will
right.
go write that now. Yeah.
I am working on it. I'm working on it. I also want to say I'm working on stuff for my YouTube channel, which is really goofy. I started it during the coronavirus stay-at-home time, and I have so many clients ask me the same questions. I started to answer them as a group on YouTube. So I love that idea. I'm going to keep putting some things out there, which is that I get to talk and nobody gets to comment or interrupt. Do we get to?
I think I've been pretty good today.
You've been excellent,
Okay.
Brian. You're always excellent.
I only interrupted you because you were using our taglines as bad things.
No, I just I meant them in
We have
another
a
way.
whole show called Beauty, Power, and
Power.
Freedom.
I
Nellie's
meant
like,
them-
you shouldn't do it for those reasons.
She meant Instagram.
I know what she meant.
But you can take your comments off your YouTube channel if you don't like them, right?
Just so you
Yes.
guys know,
Look at Ellie asking.
No.
very questionable
on there.
that Elie is even human.
That 100% I worry about it.
I am not.
I have negative blood type, B negative. That's one of the things I think is true. Real witches have
Yeah,
negative
if we're
blood.
all
Alien.
supernatural beings, it would be like alien, fey prince. I have no idea. Fallen angel. I don't know, some sort of weird like keeper of the books,
I'm
goblin.
terrified
Like
of aliens. That's
I go
what
for
it
goblin.
is.
I'd be like a goblin. I'd be like, I have all the books. And
Treasure troll.
Yeah, like I've kept them all. You'll never have them. Yeah, 100%.
Rumpelstiltskin.
Yes, I know the seat. You have to know my name or something. No, I could see that. I like that cop topic though. Yeah, American witchcraft will be our next one.
I've got a great personal story. I'll tell it next week. But
Oh yeah, save it all.
Fabulous.
Save it all.
Right, so I think we're going to sign off, everyone.
Yes,
Thank
we
you very
are.
much. If you have any questions for us, you can still post them in YouTube, and we'll try to get back to you. If it's just weird gibberish, or you say we hate us, or you don't like Ellie's lipstick, we're just going to delete it.
We're just gonna delete.
But we still find it amusing.
I could change lipsticks though. You could comment on what do you think about
No,
that.
don't do that.
You just tell Elie what lipstick
Now
to
they're
wear.
going to be like, we hate your lips.
I don't wear it too
they're
much.
just-
Anyway, thank you all for joining
Thank you
in.
all.